Welcome to our first webinar on Suite. I'm Sarah St. Ruth, the product manager, and with me is Dave.
Hi there, I'm Dave Tong. I'm in the pre-sales team. So I'm here really to show you how Suite can start answering some of your business challenges.
Great. So today, we're really excited to show you some of the features of Suite. So just going to get straight into it. First of all, we're just going to start off with a definition. So what is Suite? Suite primarily makes GIS easier, so it automates the technically difficult and the mundane, and it allows you to focus on decision making. You can configure your business rules in the app builder, and Suite ensures that your data cannot be broken at the point of entry or whilst editing. This means your data is always ready for reporting and analysis, and it reduces and in some cases removes the need for a QA process. Suite uses a spatial intelligence to access multiple relevant data sets, and these are used to help guide and inform your decision making. Suite runs in a browser, on-premise or in the cloud, both offline and online. So where does it fit within the ArcGIS platform? So Suite was built using the ArcGIS platform, and it has an app builder like many of the other apps you may have used, such as Survey123 or Web App Builder. So this builder allows you to create multiple instances of Suite with lots of different business rules defined, and we're going to show you some of those today. So let's take a look at Suite. So here I'm digitizing land ownership parcels in red. So just a quick look around the UI. At the top, we've got tools that we'll use most often. Along the left-hand panel, we've got tools we can use to interrogate our data, and along the bottom, we've got the more advanced but less commonly used tools. So what I'm going to do is going to begin digitizing a land ownership parcel, and I've got a few rules set up on this data. One of them is I can't have overlaps between neighbouring land ownership parcels. So what you'll see is Suite automatically handled that overlap, but it kept me involved in the process at the same time. It's also been a bit clever because it knows because there was an overlap that there's an inherent spatial relationship between those two features. So if I begin to reshape one, it's actually reshaping the neighbour at the same time. So what a few of you may have noticed is we've got some more tools and options available to us now. So one of the things that we've tried to do is name tools using everyday language, and the reason for this is it speeds up the learning time for the application for both GIS audiences and non-GIS audiences. So I'm just going to add a new part to our shape. I'm just going to come across the road and begin digitizing. So this idea of having like a multi-part shape could be for any sort of scenario, not just for the one that I'm doing right now. So this could be a farm that crosses a road, or it could be an environmental survey which is split by a railway track. So Suite isn't going to let me do something silly either. So here I'm not allowed to create a self-intersected shape, but it's not telling me off. It's just giving me a gentle nudge, letting me know that it's not quite right. So one of the other things I can do is I can subtract. So I can just start to remove areas of my shape. I can undo and redo. And one of the important things about the undo redo is it allows me to change my mind. It allows me to test different scenarios. But it also makes, luckily for me, the cost of a mistake really low. So I can go in and I can begin to edit my data. Another thing we might want to do is we might want to not just create data by drawing it, we may want to copy and paste from other sources. So like I mentioned before, we've got MasterMap data here. So I've just selected 3 components of the MasterMap data. I'm just going to copy and paste. And what you'll see is it's automatically merged that data to create a new land ownership parcel. So all of these rules that I've been demonstrating so far are also known as topology rules. So traditionally these can be quite complex, and Suite deals with that complexity that you know exists, but the user doesn't need to know. So within the Suite app builder, they're entirely configurable, so I could turn these on and off based on a workflow. So if I wanted to allow my data to have holes in some circumstances, I could have that on, or in this circumstance, I could have it off. So now I've given you a little look at how we can begin to create and edit data. Dave's going to show you the fun bit, which is where we can start to ask questions, knowing that our data is valid. So over to you, Dave.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. So what I'd like to do now is show you the Suite capability, but in a slightly more business context. So this first scenario is inspired by a talk that Homes England delivered at our conference this year, and that presentation, along with many of our other customer talks, are still available on the website if you'd like to understand more of their work. So it's a site planning scenario, and what I'd like to do is digitize the site plan for new development in this area. But during that process, it's important that I avoid the constraints. So you can see that we've got conservation areas, private land, urban sites, and I want to make sure that I avoid all of those during the digitization process. I'd also like to get a feel for the housing potential of this site, and to ensure that I stay in keeping with the local environment, I'd like to maintain a similar housing density to the area nearby. So let's have a quick look at the interface. So again, as Sarah was explaining earlier, the interface has been stripped back to just give me the tools I need for this part of the job. Specifically, I might want to change the base maps, I might want to pan around the map, or more importantly, I might want to create new features. So first up, I'm going to digitize a sample area to get a feel for the housing density that already exists at this site. So I choose Create, and I'm going to choose my housing density analysis layer. And I simply select on the map the area which I think gives me a rough example of what the housing density is like in this area. And when I open up the properties of that, I can see the number of homes in that area, the size of the area, and then that's calculated the residential density for me. So next up, I want to digitize my site plan. So I can start my digitization process, and if at any point I need a little bit more detail, I can long click and it's going to bring me up a magnifying glass so I can see a little bit more detail. Now, I'm not the greatest digitizer, so I'm being a little bit sloppy. I'm going into some of the constraints area. As Sarah highlighted earlier, it's not telling me off. It's giving me a gentle warning that that's an urban site, and it's going to resolve that at the end of the digitization process. So I can continue to data capture, going into these various constraints because I know that the suite's going to resolve it for me. When I need the detail, I bring up the magnifying glass. So I'm going to finish digitizing the extent of this site. And what you'll notice now that when I finish that digitization, Suite has dynamically clipped that to the constraints area. So I know that my new boundary is reflecting the site that I've actually got permission to build on. When we open up the properties page, we can also see that it's generated, obviously it understands the area, but from that, it can take the density calculation and calculate how many homes could potentially be built in this area, as well as other infrastructure, such as schools and parks that might be associated with that build. Now, if I need to change my design at a later date, that is very easy. I can subtract from my site by selecting the area that I'm no longer interested in, and that will snip that out and adjust the properties dynamically so I can see the changes to my plan. And if I needed to add new features back in again, I simply go to Add, and again I digitize the area I need to include. If I've noticed minor errors in perhaps my digitization process, or I want a little bit more accuracy, I can zoom in and I can reshape my features at vertices at a time. So in this way, I can really get the detail and make sure that I'm planning this correctly. So that's all pretty easy. I've digitized a new site boundary. I've got a feel for the potential of that site. But the reason it's easy is because of the rules that Suite's operating in the background. So let's have a quick look at actually what's going on behind the scenes. So we started off digitizing a residential density sample area. And what that's doing is that's selecting some addresses that are sitting behind the scenes to calculate the number of addresses in the area. We obviously know the area from the geometry, and we can use those two things to calculate the density. Now, I've shown you an example rule there, very simple expression that allows me to do a simple mathematical calculation to create that new attribute variable for me. Next up, I digitized my site plan, and Suite is dynamically trimming my site plan based on the constraints in the area to ensure I'm not intersecting with anything else. It's then using that density value that we pre-calculated from our sample area to estimate the number of homes and infrastructure that might be available on that site. So as a user, it's a very friendly user experience that gives me just what I need to digitize this process. But the business intelligence behind it is giving us a lot more understanding of what's likely to happen. So in this example, Suite is providing an easy-to-use editing environment that helps keep my data clean, whilst also calculating a variety of key metrics to help me understand the potential of that site. Another good example of this type of workflow might be phase 1 habitat surveys, because Suite is also able to go offline, so I can take my laptop or my tablet into the field to capture data while on site. So this next scenario is an insurance scenario, and the idea here is that I quickly want to respond to customer inquiries about whether they can have insurance on a given building. So as a call center operative, I want to understand the exposure at any given location. So I want to understand the accumulation of risk of other sites we have in the area. I want to understand whether that building is at risk of flood. And I also want to do an accumulation of bomb risk to see what the collateral damage might be if an incident was to take place. So let's go back to Suite. And here's my insurance scenario. Again, it's a very stripped down environment because all I really want to do is search for an address. So I'm going to search for Distaff Lane. Select that address, it will zoom me to the location, and then I want to choose the property that's of interest to me. So I select that point, and you can see that Suite's working away in the background. It's creating some buffers. It's highlighting the properties that I already insure in that area. So I can now bring up the properties pane, and this quite quickly is telling me, well, actually, yes, we're happy to insure that property. And then it's giving me some understanding of, well, what else is in that area. So I can see the total insured value, I can see the number of properties within 100 meters that I already insure, and I can also see the bomb risk at various different range thresholds. Finally, at the bottom here, we can see the distance to the flood zone and whether it's a flood risk. And on this occasion, it's a significant distance away, so the flood risk is relatively low. If I want more detail, I can go into the accumulation tab, and this tells me a bit more info about the other properties that I insure in that particular location. The bomb blast tab is giving me slightly more detail on that metric, so we can understand what's our exposure at various different distances from that site. So we can see here that there's actually quite a lot of exposure within 400 meters, and that might be something we want to take into consideration. And we'll touch on why that is in a moment. Finally, I've got a report option here at the bottom that allows me to condense all of that information into a simple report so I can better understand the key metrics here. So this might be used to save against that property in case we need to refer back to it later. Now, if I want to choose a different site, I simply zoom out a little bit, and it might be that we're interested in this residential building just to east of St Paul's. I can choose to select a new building, and Suite again is going to generate me a whole load of metrics. On this occasion, we can see that actually we own a lot of properties. Well, not own, we insure a lot of properties on that site because it's a retail park with lots of businesses that insure through us. So the accumulation is very high. So it might be that we're not actually interested in taking on new customers in that area. So again, let's have a quick look at what's happening behind the scenes here. So I've chosen a location, and from that location we can select the other properties that we insure in that zone. We can understand our distance to flood risk, and we can also generate buffers that might define the effect of a bomb in the area. And we're combining all that information together, and we're exposing that information so we can understand the metrics behind all of that. But ultimately, as a call center operative, I really want a yes or a no. And this process is making that very easy for me. So before I hand back to Sarah, one thing I realised I've missed out when I was running through the site planning scenario is multi-user editing. So apologies, just quickly stepping back. So we were digitising this area, and it might be that one of my colleagues is digitising in a very similar area. Hopefully you can see on screen here that that area that I'm working on has been locked. So if one of my colleagues starts digitising a new site plan in that area, they can quite happily digitise while they're outside my area of interest. But as soon as they go into my zone, Suite's just going to give me a warning that someone is already working in that area. Perhaps I need to come back to it later. Again, as Sarah says, it's not telling me off, it's just giving me a warning. I can continue digitising the rest of my site. I just might need to come back to that slightly later on. So what I've shown here is I've shown a couple of really nice examples of where Suite is giving us a very simple application to solve some nice business problems. So we started off looking at site planning, so we can digitize features really easily and understand the makeup of an area. Then we looked at an insurance scenario where I just want simple answers to questions I get from customers. Can we insure that site, and what is the risk? So that's pretty much what I wanted to cover for now. So I'm going to hand back over to Sarah, who's got another scenario to cover.
Thanks, Dave. So in each of those demos, feedback was a powerful aid in the decision-making process. So within Suite, there's plenty of ways that we can get this feedback. So you saw with Dave's insurance demo that we were having, we were seeing those buffers being automatically generated. We were seeing the constraints come up, which could come from any sort of source, including local authorities. It could be the triple SI layers that have been made available from Natural England. Well, we've also got some other inbuilt areas where Suite is going to show you that feedback. So here I've got some wall boundaries within Ealing, and this is a bit of a gerrymandering app. So what I can do is I can pull up some statistics about that. So I can see all the different property counts within those different wards. I can see within the selected wards what the voter count is, and I can also see it before and after. So what I kind of wanted to demonstrate here is that although it is an editing application, what I can do is I can quickly reshape my wall boundary, and I can see the effect that's had on the key performance indicators. And this could be applied to any boundary editing process. So whether this is optimizing sales territories, or you may use it for beat management for police forces, any of those sort of scenarios can have this information pulled back from it. So if you'd like to learn more about how you could look at boundary management using Suite, you can check out our case study on our website, or you can just come and have a chat to us. So hopefully each of those demos have given you a flavour about how you can design streamlined and accessible workflows by combining your business rules with feedback and automating the mundane, such as calculating attributes. And what I want to go on to now is a little bit about what we've been working on recently. So what I've got up here is a plan that I've georeferenced using the georeferencing capability in Suite. So I've just put a couple of control points in and georeferenced an image of a new site plan. And one of the key areas that we are constantly developing in Suite is this editing environment. So I'm going to just begin to create a new house. And what you can see are these sensors starting to appear. It's telling me when I'm at a right angle to my last dropped vertice. As you can see, it's letting me know when it should create a shape. And this idea of these sensors is it's just allowing the user to get a bit more information as they're editing. We can also turn this on so it looks at existing features within all the other layers as well. So you can see it's lining me up against different master map features, and it's lining me up against other features that I've digitized as part of this plan. Another area we've been working on is applying rules which don't just tell me, but how they connect to one another. So this is commonly used when creating and editing networks. Here you can see, as I begin to digitize, So I'm just going to create a new road link. Suite is telling us where the valid connections are based on our network rules. So I'm just going to connect here, and you can see it's automatically snapped to that node. It's again telling me where this would be a valid connection. And furthermore, it's also created a node automatically for me, because I've got a rule that says when two lines meet at the end node, at the endpoint, create a node. So it's taken away that the more of the mundane tasks that we'd have to go through, it's just automatically created that for me. And what Suite can do, so if I begin to digitize and drop one here, it's actually giving me some feedback. It's telling me that's not a valid connection. It's not at 2 endpoints. It's partway at a midpoint on the line. Suite's telling me that. Again, it's not telling me off precisely, but it is making me aware that there are issues there. And the reason why we do that is because you can break your network when you're editing it, but you do want to be able to do that because you want to be able to fix it. So it's about how they can fix those areas. So that's been a huge piece of work for us this year. But we've got lots of exciting things coming. So I'm just going to share with you our roadmap. So a really big piece that we're doing at the moment is a new app builder, which will make it easier than ever to configure Suite applications. We're adding in a wireframe environment, and the reason why we're doing this is to actively encourage iterative design. So it's allowing you to be as agile and as flexible as you need to be to reach your business and workflow demand. We continue to work with our customers and focusing on the editing and design experience, and that insight is actively driving development of Suite. You can see that this is a constant theme that's running through all of our development cycles. This we see as the future, making GIS as accessible, as intuitive as possible so we can open up the power of a geospatial approach. I'd like to show you a super quick video which shows a lot of what Suite can do now, but even better, it shows some of the areas which will be coming into Suite very, very soon. So in this scenario, it is a planning application. It knows all about the planning regulations for this area, and it's allowing somebody, a member of the public, to begin digitizing and see if they need planning permission. We're looking at accessible technologies such as voice and bot integration, so a wider range of audience can interact with spatial data. We want Suite to be able to intelligently answer your questions. So in this case, it's pulling up information specific to this user's address. It's also telling you where the nearest pub is. We want to present further information tailored to an individual user. And we want to create editing environments which are suited to industry-specific tasks. So this could be a planning scenario, but it could also be a phase 2 habitat survey. We want to give enhanced intelligent feedback which understands not just the editing task, but the workflow the organisation is trying to achieve. And we want to further use innovative technologies such as 3D. So hopefully we've been able to give you a flavour of some of the capabilities of Suite. And we'd like to thank you for attending, and we take any questions if you've got any.
So actually, yeah, there's been quite a lot of questions.
Oh, okay.
So in light of the number, we're probably not going to be able to go through them all.
Cool.
I'll have a stab at some of them, and I'll pass some over to you, Sarah.
Okay.
Some of the more tricky ones. So one of the first questions was, can you take it offline, and does it then integrate with GPS on your device? So yes, you can take it offline. You can use the GPS to generate locations you want to digitize. Can you snap to master map? Again, yes, you can snap to any features you have available in your map. Someone noticed there was a stencil tool, and wondered what that was. So stencils, I don't know whether you want to go into that.
I can actually show stencils, yeah, I think I can. This might be a bit dangerous, but.
So the idea behind stencils, they're predefined geometries that you might want to add into your map. So in my mind, one of the good features that might be, you might be digitizing a floor plan for a building and you know how big your desks are. So you can digitize a feature of defined geometry, and then you're just editing it to meet requirements.
Absolutely. So yeah, the functionality that Dave's talking about is hopefully an area where we can begin to speed up that digitising process. So I just digitise a quick square, we can pull these on. This is just a generic stencil gallery that we provide out of the box with Suite. So a little dinosaur as well. But what we can do is we can also just take shapes that we've created and we can copy and paste them directly into our stencil gallery. So here we go, we've got an L-shaped house. So I can use the actual size of the shape. And when I then go into my stencil gallery, so I'm just going to come off here. Sorry, because I've done this before. So what you can see is I've now got that L shape that I can begin to use. And this could be standard shapes for whatever your organisation is trying to achieve. And we can flip these over as well if we want to. So yeah, the idea of stencils, this is something that we will be, again, working on quite a lot this year. We want to be able to provide more of a gallery for indoor mapping as well. So looking at the use case from if you want to create detailed floor plans. So yeah, this is definitely an area which, one, we've been working on, and two, we'll see lots of changes coming in the future. Cool.
Okay, so just going back to the questions, how does editing work and where are changes saved, and is there an option for read only? So as part of the configuration of Suite, you decide which layers are configurable or which are editable and which are not. So in the site planning scenario I showed you at the beginning, I made it so that those constraints are not editable. So they are in the map. I can select them if I want to, but they cannot be adjusted because they might be being fed from a third party. They might be coming from Natural England or the Environment Agency. They might be things that we're hosting ourselves, but we don't want them changed. We only want to capture the new site plan. So that's the only area that we've allowed editing on. So you can be sure that you're not going to have people editing the things that you don't want them to. One of the next questions was licensing, and is it against the named user? So yes, indeed it is. It is against the named user. And a related question is Suite a standalone product? So it is part of our platform, and you would need either Artisan Line or Portal to support the use of Suite. So it's integrated with the rest of our environment as part of that process. What else have I got here? Can you adjust the zoom level of the background maps? So the background maps are defined through your online or Portal account. So by default, you'll be using the base maps that either Esri UK or Esri provide. But if you wanted to configure your own base maps, then that can be done.
Yeah.
Sarah, then are there any other options there?
Yeah, so like Dave just mentioned, it is going to use zoom levels set up by the base maps. Suite actually has an additional configuration where you can go beyond the tiles. So that actually creates more of a grid format, so you can begin to digitize against a grid. Again, we put this in to allow for more of the intricate mapping that was required of more of indoor mapping. So yeah, there are capabilities, but as a rule, Suite would just adhere to the web map configuration.
And another question is Suite a refinement, a replacement for Collector, because it looks more refined? So that's very nice of you to say so. Thank you very much. The answer there is no, it's not a replacement for Collector. In fact, there's a new version of Collector coming out in the next few weeks called Aurora, which is going to have many improvements on the existing Collector workflow. But this is something that we think certainly has options in field work, and it does provide a slightly nicer editing environment, but it's something that's being built by Esri UK rather than it being a corporate Esri product.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we very much see Collector as a premier editing application where you want to take your data out into the field, you want to do that data collection. And then there might be at times different requirements which unfortunately Collector might not achieve, or it might not be within the scope of what Collector's purpose is. And that's where we would look at something like Suite. But yeah, we definitely still absolutely value the purpose that Collector's doing. So.
Okay, and one final question before we close out. This one for you, Sarah, because I'm not sure the answer. I think I do. Is there a library of templates that can be used with Suite? If there are lots of common tasks for users, how would they configure that?
Okay, yeah, actually there is a default template library which ships with the builder. So there is 3 scenarios that we've got set up. So one of them is a farming scenario. So this looks at just different land use types. It pulls up some of those dynamic feedback pieces that you've seen, so the charting. It also does feedback where it's pre-calculating how much crop you would lose if you started to digitize different ineligible features. And so some of you may have seen that if you've attended our conference and seen those in closing plenary. So that's quite a common scenario that we showed. So that's available. There is a habitat survey type template which is available, which is using some different functionality we haven't seen today, stuff like triggers, which is basically when you create a shape, another one could be created, or it triggers off a GP task, or it writes it into a different geodatabase, and so on and so forth. So yeah, that scenario very much shows that. It also shows how Suite supports linear referencing. And then our third scenario that we've got, which comes with the template, is more around the boundary editing. So it's not actually looking at ward boundaries, but it's looking at how you can generate sales territories using different methods. So whether or not you want to base it on your salespeople that you have or your customers that you've got. And again, pulls back some of those aspects of feedback, so you can see how much of your customer falls into which segments and stuff like that. So those are very generic demos. I wouldn't say, they may not be fit for purpose for exactly what your organisation wants to do, but hopefully should inspire and give you guidance if you wanted to implement that sort of functionality, but to a completely different industry or different workflow.
And actually, I lied slightly. One final question, because I think it's quite important, is do you need to be a coder to be able to use Suite?
Absolutely not. So some of you might be aware, and if you've not, something to check out, a scripting language called Arcade, which came into the platform last year. So this is started to filter through to ArcGIS Pro, and you can use it in ArcGIS Online to control labeling and symbology. And hopefully those of you who use it can see it's quite a lightweight expression language. So we use a very, very similar, almost identical language within Suite. So it uses everything that Arcade does now, but it also has additional functions which allow you to achieve some of the workflow type stuff you've seen today, which isn't yet available within the Arcade language. So the idea of this is it is really a very low code environment within the app builder. A lot of it is just configuration. So you can just say, I do not want features in this layer to overlap features in this layer, or I don't want them to overlap themselves. And that's just pull down menus. So all of those sort of functionality is very much out of the box drop down menus. The stuff that you want to get a bit more advanced, or you want to start to do those attribute calculations, that's when you start to use the scripting language. But the scripting language is not a full-blown development language. It is just an expression language, very similar to if you were going to use Excel, for example, to write in formulas for cell calculation. But you absolutely do not have to be a coder to do it. I can attest to that because I am not a coder, and I can still make the odd application. So.
And I think the hope is that we'll do another session in the future to perhaps dig into that in a bit more detail.
Absolutely.
So the objective today is just to give you a feel for what the capabilities of the Suite are, kind of give you an overview with a few business scenarios, to inspire you to think about what the possibilities are here, and then me and Sarah will support you moving forward.
Absolutely. So yeah, if you do want to find out more, so we do have a website available which kind of details some of the key points that we've raised today. You can contact us. So you can either contact your customer success manager or your sales manager. And if you don't know who these are, or you don't have one assigned to you, you can just contact sales@esriuk.com, and that will come through to one of us to be able to talk you through your requirements, or just understand exactly what you want to do, and have a look, explore those with you. So thank you very much for coming to join us today.
Yeah, thanks for me as well. Hope you've all found it useful.
Yes, definitely.